What would you do if you were given a second chance and all you had to do was drink a potion given to you by fate?
Wonder with us. I'm Bethany.
And I'm Konr.
And this is Wonder with Us.
It's a podcast.
Talking about the Twilight Zone.
Mr. Denton on Doomsday.
Episode 3.
That's the one. So I would first like to state that this felt like the shortest episode so far.
Yeah.
And it has always felt like the shortest episode to me, despite the fact that it is 25 minutes, just like 99% of the episodes. It feels just bare bones.
Well, and there didn't seem to be a lot of extended pauses.
Almost
like,
none. It is all story.
After the initial narration and like you get the opening scenes, the previous episodes seem to have more extended pauses where you get like the ambiance of the area. They show you like a scene of, where the characters are and such, and like you get that all in the opening scene. Like you get so much information in this episode from the first not even minute of it.
Yeah, I mean we get the standard Twilight Zone introduction as they have adopted at this point, being the Rod Serling narration leading into the episode, not directly related to the episode. And then we just kind of fall into the episode.
Yeah.
So we start with a wide shot of a dirt road with a horse-drawn wagon
in what is very clearly an old western town.
Yeah, as the camera pans around, the town is everything we have come to expect of an old western town, visually speaking.
Mm-hmm. The one main drag, horse and buggy.
The first building you see is the saloon, and the rest of them don't matter because it's a western town.
Yep. Yeah. So this episode focuses on Al Denton.
Good old Al.
Was a once-upon-a-time gunslinger turned town drunk until he met with fate.
That does appear to be a thing. We're 3 episodes in, and we are elbow deep in people with problems meeting higher beings of one nature or another who are offering them a solution that usually isn't what they think it is.
And we were talking about this before we came up to the studio, in that, like, it does seem to be a growing trend that things just kind of happen to these characters when they need them, or something convenient of that nature. So.
Although, to be fair, it'd be a real boring show if we watched Al for the 6 months leading up to this event.
Right. The downward spiral to where he is now.
Just the fall that is Al Denton.
Yes. Yeah.
So this one was, again, written by Rod, the Brain Daddy himself. Directed by Alan Reisner. Cinematography was George T. Clemens. None of those people did I get any additional information on, and it's only now occurring to me that I should have done that.
I think their work kind of speaks for themselves, though.
Sure, if you've ever heard of them or found their work, which I have not.
But the cinematography in this, too. Right? And we'll get to that.
All right, yeah, we'll get to that.
Don't sound so excited.
So we got Al Denton, our main character, played by Dan Duryea. 80-some-odd movies and TV shows to his career. He's an actor. He's a character actor. He acted in a lot of westerns, apparently.
A lot of method acting, too.
A lot of method. Then we got Martin Landau, a famed actor and acting coach and voice actor. He plays our first protagonist, and we are introduced to him as Mr. Dan Hodeling, I believe is how they pronounce it.
Yeah. The T makes a D sound, something like that.
Yeah.
Spelled differently than how it sounds.
Yeah, it's Hodeling. It's Hodeling.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound as good, though. So we're introduced to Dan Hodeling as he throws our main character head over heels bodily from the saloon doors.
Yeah, he fell really hard.
He took a fairly convincing fall at the bottom of the steps. Kept his footing till he got to the dirt, which was probably good for him as an actor and a character.
Yes.
But we are introduced to Martin Landau, who is playing, he's Hodeling. Dan Hodeling. We are introduced to him at this point. He comes out of the saloon, followed by a gaggle of adult bullies.
Because you always need a crowd when you're bullying. It's no fun otherwise.
There you go. And in true bullying fashion, he comes out, pours a drink on good old Al Denton's head as he sits on the steps. Looks remarkably like somebody's getting peed on.
I was just going to say, can we add a little production note in there? Because that profile shot of his belt buckle and him holding the bottle at his waist while Mr. Denton's leaning up against the railing there.
Just rubbing it into his face, catching as much in his mouth as he can. It's definitely booze, folks.
Yeah.
It's not pee.
Which is good, really. Because if you're sucked into the story, you think about it like Western days. It's going to be a month or two before dude can get that shirt clean, you know?
It looks like it's been a year or two since he even tried to wash the shirt he's wearing in the opening scene.
Point being, it's not pee. It's booze.
And we're not here to judge Al, but we're going to. So, yeah, Hodeling, first protagonist we see, comes out, dumps some what is presumably rum based on our main character's nickname of Rummy.
Oh, I didn't make that connection. That's good. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm making assumptions. Connection is a better word, though.
Rummy. Maybe it was a catch-all phrase.
Maybe Mr. Dan Hodeling just didn't know any other booze by name. Give me the rum that's sour.
Right.
You mean whiskey? No, I want the sour
sour
bitter rum.
That's for 5 cents.
Yeah, I want the nickel bottle of sour rum. So he comes out, dumps some booze on the head of Mr. Denton.
Which seems to revive him.
Of course it does, because that's just how that works, you know. It doesn't have to be in your mouth when you're addicted to a substance. You find yourself a crackhead, just sprinkle a little on their hair, they'll wake right up.
Mm-hmm. And moving on.
Anyway, Hodeling proceeds to request that Denton pay for his drink by singing a song, How Dry I Am.
Mm-hmm.
I assume
a whole 3 bars.
It was 3 choruses, and that was the next time they met.
Oh, well, yeah. Jumping ahead.
Whatever the case may be, I've never heard this song. It sounds pretty bad coming from both of them. May or may not be an actual song. I didn't bother to look it up because I don't care that much. So he
staggers up, walks back.
We get our first shot of the man we will know as Fate standing behind Denton at his cart.
Mm-hmm.
Although he hasn't been... Oh, he has been introduced at this point because in the opening narration,
yep,
they mention him.
In passing, they mentioned him, but the painting that was on the side of his cart was Henry J. Fate, dealer in everything.
You can't pigeonhole yourself to just medicine that doesn't work.
Yeah, 3rd episode, and we get another peddler.
Yet another peddler. However, we haven't met him yet. So Dan, in true fashion, sings a couple bars of How Dry I Am. Sorry, Dan, Daria, Al Denton. A lot of Dans in this. I'm just going to go with character names. I'm just going to cover up the actors' names until I need them. Boom, just like that.
Well, to be fair, he did actually sing the first line to try to coax him to sing, so I could see the confusion there.
Yeah, thanks for trying to cover up for my lack of paying attention.
Anytime.
Denton sings a couple bars of this terrible, terrible song. Huddling goes to hand him the bottle. Instead of handing him the bottle, smashes it on the upright post, which makes a remarkable breaking sound. It is like a gunshot on that porch.
It's pretty fantastical.
Solid sound production
true
there.
middle school fashion as well.
Yep. And then tosses what's left of the bottle out into the dirt, where Denton rushes to it, dropping to his knees and bathing himself in it, essentially.
Very sloppy drinking for a drunk.
Yep. No, he's wasting a lot. We get our first glimpse of Liz Smith, the friendly nobody.
Yeah.
She might work at the bar.
The implication was that she worked at the saloon. She was dressed similarly as another character who we don't know about, who stayed on the stairs, who I didn't actually see until we rewatched it a second time.
Well, there was a professional lady is what that was. So we get our first look at Liz Smith as she looks disappointed at Denton while he sits in the street.
And she had a brief conversation with Charlie the barman.
She did, yes.
Won't you stop this? Because they're apparently, the implication is they're consistently demoralizing Al by doing this, and that he must pay for his drinks by continually singing the same song.
This terrible
song. Charlie, can't you stop this? And he said something to the effect of, it won't do any good. Like, I don't like it as much as you do, but, what are we going to do? So they sit back and they watch. Disapprovingly.
Then Mrs. Smith flips on a dime when she comes out, sees Mr. Denton sitting in the dirt drinking his booze, just looks disappointed, and walks back into the bar without another thought.
Yep. And so he passes out.
We get kind of a mixed signal on Liz. So Denton passes out in the street. We get yet another look at the man that will be introduced to us as Fate, as he kind of disappointedly looks at Denton as well and walks away.
If you recall the last episode where Mr. Death gave that full-on stare, they really, towards the camera, straight into the souls of the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Fate does that quite a bit in this. They're really capitalizing on that, because every scene or every shot of him that we have seen from this point is just super long stares into the camera.
See, and I couldn't actually tell if he was looking in the camera or if he was supposed to be looking longingly at the scene behind the camera. It's really kind of hard to tell, especially with some of the lighting that they had going.
It's a similar setup, though.
Whatever the case may be, we're getting a lot of close-in shots on Mr. Fate's face. So we get another shot of Fate. He looks the way he looks and then walks away. He's a very well-dressed man for a peddler. That's not the point.
Called it a black frock that he was
wearing. A
wearing.
black frock. I don't know what a frock is, but I like how it sounds. As he walks away, what do we see but a revolver materialize on the ground next to Mr. Denton's hand.
Very conveniently.
Of course. It's magic in the West.
I really, really like this scene. Just before the gun materializes, the narration by Rod, showing a portrait of Al Denton. He kind of gives a little bit of the background, and he said something to the effect of, he has begun his dying early through a long agonizing route through a maze of bottles. I like that because poetically it's beautiful.
Nerd.
Yeah.
It's a good scene. It's well narrated. It's well shot as well, from my so humble opinion. So yeah, the gun appears in his hand. Denton wakes up from his... Sorry, go ahead. You look like I missed something. Lay it on me.
Well, he doesn't wake up with it in his hand. He wakes up and reaches for the bottle.
And then almost gets run over by a cart.
Which conveniently turns him in the direction where he notices the gun. And as he's standing up in his waking stupor, he's holding the gun, and then Miss Smith appears. And
she does not materialize like the gun. She
No.
just walks into frame.
She walks into frame.
Like a normal mortal human.
And they're talking about the gun, and he says that he doesn't remember the last time he actually held a gun.
Actually, what he says is he hasn't held a gun since,
And
then he fades off.
Can't remember. Yeah.
Okay. He may or may not have said, I can't remember. We'll get back to we'll have the judges look at that again. And he, introduce Hodling yet again as he
just
leaves
before that.
the bar.
Sorry. As he's holding the gun in his hand and talking about how he doesn't actually remember how long it's been, he
allegedly
he seems like it's very obvious that he hasn't actually held a gun in a long time because he's kind of holding it very gingerly. And like he's very unwieldy with it when he actually, like, in this oncoming scene that you're talking about when Dan shows up again. Like,
oh yeah, he is stumbling to just hold that thing.
At first he's being very, very careful with it, and it's like a very delicate thing, and then it's not.
And suddenly it just very, very suddenly becomes a nothing in his hand that he seems to forget he's holding. But Dan Hodling, Mr. Hodling, the black-dressed cowboy with the silver fasteners, comes out of the bar yet again, followed by yet again a gaggle, an absolute gaggle of adults.
Nameless,
grown-ass
voiceless
adults.
Mm-hmm.
And they decide that they need to pick on Al because he's awake.
Yeah, and they're requesting that song from their songbird.
Indeed. 3 choruses of How Dry I Am.
In which he mimes a drink in his hand.
Suggesting that he is willing to supply a drink for yet another rendition.
And this happens while Miss Smith is still outside, and they just had the conversation about him holding the gun and all of that. And he kind of looks at her, and then looks back at Holding, and was like, "Yeah, I don't."
Hodling.
Pardon. I'm gonna call him Dan. That's what I'm gonna do. He is Dan now. But anyway, he looks at Miss Smith, and she's telling him, you don't have to do this. And he goes, but he's going to give me a drink. To the devil with him. I will get you a drink, and you don't have to do that for it. I liked that. That was fun.
It was that was very good. And he completely ignores it.
Yeah. And
begins singing. Mm-hmm. Yet again, terribly out of key.
And then his face crumples.
It does. He's so sad.
It made me sad.
He's so sad he has to sing for his drink.
Yeah. And then, Dan is very condescending.
Soft spot Dan, man.
And very...
I wouldn't have guessed he had it in him. just a big old teddy bear.
Are you saying from the point that Al stopped singing?
Yeah.
He's like, all right, you've been a good boy. Go on, get your drink.
I mean, he's not a nice man, but he's a big old softy.
I don't believe that at all.
I do. I believe it.
I don't.
At no point does he express any other thing than being a giant softy.
So he tells him to go get his drink, at which point Al staggers up the stairs, and then he sees the gun.
And seems mostly entertained by it initially. The initial is a very, mocking, Denton, you did what the
I believe his words were, "Hey, gunner, where'd you get that artillery?"
Debatable. No, I think that's actually correct. And Al attempts to explain that he found it in the street.
Mm-hmm.
Huddling then suggests that maybe because once Al was fairly good with one of those, maybe they should try it again. They should draw on each other and see if he can outdraw Huddling.
Mm-hmm. And then Charlie the barman and Miss Smith try to get involved.
Of course, Charlie gets a door kicked in his face.
Mm-hmm. Miss Smith gets pushed out of the way as Dan makes his way down the stairs.
Leaving all of his friends behind the man he is assumingly about to shoot at.
Mm-hmm.
Solid friendship there, Dan.
Right? And he goes, I'm going to give you a break. I'm going to do it left-handed. And turns his gun in the
Does
holster.
that real smooth, turn the gun in the holster so it's facing the wrong way, and then draws for no reason.
Yeah. At which point...
Not part of the contest. He's just drawn to show that he can do it left-handed.
Right.
Like a douche.
Well, all things considered. Silver fasteners, you say?
He's looking he's looking sharp, you know?
Okay, so as Dan is showing off, Al is trying to talk to Miss Smith and
just wildly waving this unknown weapon.
Unwieldy is what that is.
Like somebody today would have tagged him with like child endangerment, even though there wasn't a kid around.
Mm-hmm.
Like that kind of just like he could have taken out a blimp and not known it.
I really like the way the camera focused on the gun and his hand movement. Because there's like that one shot where it zooms in on the gun and he's
as
just
it's
kind of
waving
rotating
around.
It side to side like.
He's gesturing with it as he begs
he's
Mrs.
talking.
Smith to explain that he doesn't want to do this.
Yeah.
And then he fires.
Accidentally.
Complete accident. But what's he hit?
The shooting hand of
That's
Dan.
right, the shooting hand of Dan. The left one, not the good one. The left one that was holding the gun.
Right.
And the bar goes nuts.
Oh, yeah.
Barkeeper comes out. Suddenly all of Dan's friends got themselves a new bestie.
Uh-huh. And Charlie's like, hey, drinks on the house. And, like, they're all ushering him in. And so they
the
leave.
loyalty in that town is absolute garbage.
You could flip a coin on it. So they bring him in.
Or just shoot somebody in the hand.
I mean, sure.
I need new friends. I'm going to shoot them. You know, standard.
Yeah, and making friends in the early West was easy.
Just a disclaimer, we do not condone shooting people in an attempt to make friends. Or for any other reason, probably.
But, given the time and place, this was the Old West, and apparently, from what we have seen, that's how it was done.
Perfectly normal.
Either case, they all usher him in. The bartender pours, 3 drinks?
None of which get touched.
So much wasted whiskey.
It's not wasted. Somebody drank it, I'm sure. I'm sure Charlie drank it.
Not in that scene.
Not in that scene, but I mean,
But
come
anywho,
on now.
they pour him a drink, and they're all talking about it and talking about how that was a big move, and he's just as good as he ever was, and all this. And one of the other nameless men in the bar makes the mistake of calling him Mr. Denton.
I wouldn't call it a mistake. It definitely caught Mr. Denton off guard. I don't think he was actually offended by it. I think he was just surprised to hear somebody refer to him in such a polite manner.
Yeah. At which
Although
point,
I don't remember if that was before or after Hodling came back in the bar.
I think he did, but I think it was in the background. They were still talking about how this was a huge thing, that he now has a gun in his hand again.
Gotcha.
And then he calls him Mr. Denton, and of course, you know, he's being unwieldy with the gun again and kind of pointing in that dude's direction. What'd you call me?
He's literally just waving the barrel of the gun at this dude who's being super polite to him.
Super unsteady, very sketch looking. And he goes, well, I didn't mean no offense by it, Mr. Denton.
I just asked what you just called me.
Mm-hmm.
And
And then we see the switch, Mr. Denton, going from Rummy, as he was known, to a respectable title. He called me Mr. Charlie.
Indeed. Now, I do believe that was after the second encounter with Hodling. Whatever the case may be, Hodling makes his way back into the bar at some point while they're all talking.
I'm jumping ahead. Go on.
And yells out, Rummy! Mm-hmm. Rummy, turn around and look at me.
Turn around and face me.
Denton. And he turns around, and once again, Mr. Denton tries to explain that it was an accident and he didn't want no trouble, waving the gun around like a lunatic. And Fate walks up to the door of the bar.
Which we see his head poking through.
We see that little prairie dog head pop over. And then we get a close-up on him as he appears to be watching Denton.
Mm-hmm.
Denton waving the gun around. Denton once again accidentally fires.
Yeah.
Hits the chandelier in the ceiling of the pub, saloon, bar, drinking establishment, which falls, barely missing Hodling.
Hitting his gun
out of his hand. Knocking him to the floor, and the crowd goes mild.
Indeed. And Charlie, again, asks Mr. Denton if he wants a drink.
Let me just pour a fourth drink. Nobody's drinking the first three.
To which he replies, I've had enough.
I think I'm going to go get a shave. Which he needs.
Yeah.
Badly.
Desperately.
He either needs to have not shaved the last 12 times or he needs one now.
Mm-hmm.
Because he doesn't look good. He also needs to change his shirt. Thing is filthy.
Which I figured, him getting the shave and then saying that he's had enough to drink was sort of his way of like rejoining his reentrance into proper society, because now he's being called Mr. Denton, a proper title. So
Indeed.
he's gonna fit the part and clean up.
And it gives the director a way to show a aesthetic difference between Drunk Rummy and Mr. Denton the gunslinger.
Right. So he makes his
breaking
way
everything
out the door, but not before passing Dan.
Dan Hodling, who has made his way back to his feet.
Yep.
Looks astounded. He's been shot in the wrist, had a chandelier done, almost fell on his head, and just looks confused.
Completely confused.
When Rummy walks up to him.
Uh-huh. And proceeds to backhand him in a super dramatic way that was absolutely phenomenal.
Left hip all the way to right field as that hand comes across.
Knocks him on his feet, and don't call me Rummy anymore.
And then makes his way out the bar.
Yeah, to go for his shave, because he's going to get his shave.
Just after Hodling takes a Tony-winning fall into the tables.
It was so dramatic and beautiful.
Oh, Days of Our Lives would have just lost it to have that opportunity.
Yep. So Mr. Denton gets outside and is met yet again, followed out even, by Miss Smith.
Who cannot seem to leave him alone.
No.
She into him.
Constant.
She into him.
And she goes, well, everything's going to be okay now.
Charlie Dunn told me you're as good with a gun now as you ever was.
Hey, here we go. Line by line reading. I like it. This is good.
Shooting from the hip. I wasn't sure if that was the line.
And, well, no, it was exactly.
Nice.
So.
I'm good at what I do.
Yeah, I know. So, in this, little snidbit of conversation, she wanted to know how his drinking started. And in the first encounter, when he first wakes up and finds the gun, he tells her, well, he just kind of woke up one day and got the habit and didn't quit. But now we get a little more information in that he started his drinking a little bit earlier each day because he, being the top gun of that town, was continually on a daily basis being challenged by other top guns.
Who wanted to see who was faster. Am I faster? Is Rummy faster? Although he probably wasn't Rummy back then. He's
still Mr. Denton.
He was still Mr. Denton the gunslinger.
So he said as this progressed, he continued to start his drinking a little bit earlier. And he got challenged in particular.
His last duel.
The last one was this 16-year-old kid.
And I done left him bleeding right there in front of the saloon.
With my bullet in him. That was the only line you missed. You almost got it.
I wasn't done.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
I paused for effect and you stole the line from me.
I'm sorry. Continue.
Now, sweetheart, don't you be doing that no more. Can't do it. Can't talk at that.
So, anywho, that is what we learn. And that is why we assume his drinking continued to get worse from there and he hung up his gun.
Indeed. Although we find out later that he was, even as a gunslinger, known as the gunslinger who rarely carried his gun.
I don't remember.
We will get to that, and I will point it out.
Perfect, thank you. So anyway, he goes in to get his shave.
And beautiful for the time cinematic moment as he walks in to the barber to get his shave. Doesn't seem to tell the barber anything, just walks in, takes a seat. Barber throws a towel over him. They seem to have an understanding. We see the reflection in the window of this barbershop, and who should be standing there?
But Mr. Fate.
Mr. Fate himself with a shit-eating grin on his face.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what's up.
He is always smirking.
Unless he's frowning or flipping out and yelling immediately for no reason.
But
like those are the three emotions of Fate. Like grinning, glaring.
Or smirking.
Or I was going to say, or shouting, drink it.
Well, yeah. We'll get to that, though. But his resting face appears to be a smirk, is all I'm saying.
Yes, it does. And that's the end of that scene. We got to the end of that scene. We're like 2 minutes into the episode and 30 minutes into recording.
Hey.
Go us. All right, what happens next?
So he gets a shave. We see that beautiful shot. And then,
next scene is in his apartment.
right.
Above what appears to be a horse
Something.
stable of some
Except
sort.
we don't know that.
We don't. It just looks like a barn that he's living above.
Yeah. So then, two dudes don't bother knocking. He's like, he's standing in the mirror admiring himself, because he's all clean shaven.
His hair's combed. He's wearing a shirt that's not covered in God knows what.
A clean shirt, which I didn't catch.
You're
so
welcome.
Initially, so thank you for that. But anyway, these two dudes walk in, just not bother knocking. I guess they're used to saloon doors where that's not a thing. They walk in, they tell him that he has an appointment at 10 o'clock. They didn't say those words, those are my words, but that somebody is real curious to see if he is Top Gun.
Pete Grant
Is rolling into town.
Gonna meet him at the saloon.
At 10 p.m.
It's a terrible time to have a duel. Like, it's dark out, although we figure out they find a way around that, so that's great.
Sure. So he reluctantly says, I'll be there.
After initially trying to talk his way out of it and deciding it wasn't worth his time.
Mm-hmm. And we see him packing.
Yes. Skipping ahead a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Are we skipping ahead a little bit?
No, I think he starts packing.
No, because didn't he go out and... He went out and did some practice shooting at some point.
That's right. But, yeah. So that happens. There's a bit of a pause where he's kind of looking off. And then the next thing we see is him practice shooting.
In the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It was just nighttime when these dudes came in.
Right.
It's clearly the next day. And how he has spent his day is firing 3 bullets and a can on a fence.
Mm-hmm.
Misses all 3. Can't hold his hand steady.
And he has that duel at 10 p.m. that night.
And you can see the defeat on his face when he misses the can.
He's worried.
Clearly, I'd be worried too. Nobody likes getting shot.
If I can backtrack just a teeny bit.
We must, we're so far into recording.
I know, but just before his shave, he's not expecting to live through this second chance.
No,
and I
he
feel
actually
like that's
mentions
important.
that he wants to get the shave because he wants to look presentable on the day he dies.
Mm-hmm. Wants to look proper on the day of his death. And I think that's important because that, if anything else, you can see evident in his face when he misses those shots. He's like, well, he's kind of resigned, like, well, I'm going to die today, And that's why I backtracked. We will move forward.
The next shot is him
packing.
He is packing everything he owns in an old suitcase sitting on his bed.
Mm-hmm. More like a rucksack, but yeah.
Woman. Do we need to argue about this?
No, details matter to me. It's okay. Continue. So he's packing.
I'm leaving. So he's packing. And we hear a clang from outside. Mr. Denton goes to his window, pulls back the curtains that are everybody as dirty as his old shirt.
And another beautiful panning shot in that whole transition from him moving from the curtain aside to what we see outside, which is Mr. Fate in his outside of his carriage.
Packing up.
Mm-hmm.
Packing up his cart. Looks like he's about to move on to the next town.
And then looks up and they have this moment where they make eye contact.
Eye locked from 50 yards. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. And Fate lets out yet another Fate-y grin. And Denton replies to this grin by going outside to meet Mr. Fate for no particular reason other than they made eye contact.
Sure. And that shot was beautiful, too.
When he's coming down the stairs.
That is still my favorite shot, I think, of him walking down the stairs and you see his shadow on the wall, but it's side by side because it's a shadow. Just the way it was filmed is gorgeous, and as he trails off the steps, the shadow, naturally, will fade as he's walking towards Fate. And I just thought that was super cool.
It was aesthetically pleasing, but there was a part of me from a lighting enthusiast standpoint that was a bit annoyed by it. Because as he was coming down the stairs, there's no sun out. The only lights we have are hanging oil lamps
Yeah.
that are hanging at approximately the roof line of single-story buildings.
So the shadows shouldn't be as dark as they actually were.
Well, the shadow shouldn't have been as exaggerated as it was, and it absolutely should not have been on an equal level with him. And when he gets to the bottom of the steps, his shadow is, like, that light is close to at his same height off to the side, casting that shadow, which makes the shot look good, but from a lighting enthusiast standpoint, which I consider myself,
factual.
it looks unrealistic.
That's fair.
But we come to see the next couple of scenes, or the next scene that follows, rather, is just chock full of unrealistic lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I can blame them for that. They were obviously shooting at night.
Yeah.
And
to get such a differentiating contrast between what we know as day and what is portrayed night and what is actual night. So.
Right, and I get the impression that they were actually shooting at night because as far as I could tell from what we saw, they were shooting outside in all of the outside shots. It appeared to be an actual outside on set kind of thing.
And not a studio.
Not in a studio. So I'm sure getting the lighting so that everything could be seen was rough, and that is what it is. So he introduces himself to Mr. Fate for the first time with the sentence, "I can't use anything."
Yep. And Fate's like, "What?
Come again? Sorry? What's that? How's that?"
Yeah, how's that? I like that. It's a common line.
It is, and I'm sure it was just a colloquialism of the day, but I am fond of it.
It makes me happy, though.
I am fond of it.
How's that? He goes, "Well, you're a peddler, aren't you? I don't need anything."
Yes, sir. A dealer in everything.
Mm-hmm. And goes on to give a little list of all the things that he is selling, all the wares that he has from, pots and pans and
utensils
and clothing. And then he moves on to
medicine,
potions, elixirs, so on and so forth.
I'm sure if he had kept talking, he'd have got to the snake oil eventually.
Indeed. But that wasn't the case. He gave him a running list, and Denton's just kind of standing there looking at him. And then he pulls out a little bottle. Is that what happened?
Just before he pulls out the bottle, he says, "You're Al Denton, and you're running away," as he's crawling into the cart. Said, "You shouldn't run away."
Yeah. I shouldn't run away. I should just stand here and get shot, or get shot at, or
get shot to death.
That, because he's expecting to die, so of course he's going to run away, and Fate tries to dissuade him to stay.
Fate succeeds in convincing him to stay by offering him the quick draw?
Yeah.
The quick draw pill or something?
I think he called it a pill. It was in a bottle.
It was a liquid in a bottle. I don't know. It's kind of hard to hear him. But he explains that drinking this will make the drinker the fastest draw, the fastest shooter, and the most accurate shooter.
But for 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
After it is consumed.
He's on his own.
Yep. And so, of course, he wants him to test out the merchandise and not just take his word for it.
Yep. Offers him a bottle and gets real weird when he doesn't want to drink it.
Menacing almost. It's very ominous.
Like the way he reacted, just borderline shouting, "Drink it."
Yeah.
Had that happened to me, I'd have dropped that bottle and be like, "Yo, you're trying to poison me. Deuces," and I'd have dipped.
Yep.
But Al's not as smart as me, so he drank it.
Sure. He drank it.
And 13 seconds later, by Fate's count, not my own, by Fate's count, 13 seconds later, shoots at a light, 50 yards away, hanging from a building, hits it, it shatters. It's a very pleasing aesthetic moment.
Yeah.
It tells us exactly how effective this potion is, because God knows Al couldn't hit a fucking bean can sitting on a fence post from 20 feet.
Not with the way he wields that gun, no.
No, and he spun on his heel, fired from the hip, got himself a lamp, which somebody's going to have to pay for.
Sure. He did have a fair amount of motivation, though, because in the same tone that Fate was telling him to drink it, he goes, "There's your target, Denton. Now pull. Shoot it." He's yelling at him. Of course, he's going to turn on his heel and shoot it, but he actually hit it.
But he hit it, and he looks every bit as surprised as I was to see him hit it.
Mm-hmm. Didn't he look
years
down
ago.
at the gun again?
He did. He looked down at the gun as if it had done something he wasn't expecting. At which point, Fate, excuse me, continues his count of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a solid 20, 25 seconds after the potion has been drank, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
Right. So that happens, and the next scene we see him standing in the saloon.
He has been given another bottle by Fate.
Yeah. He's standing in the saloon surrounded by people, and Charlie, the bartender, "You want a drink?"
Offers him the only comfort he knows how to offer anybody.
And he says no. And then Charlie, we see a very grim-looking Doc in the corner. And, "Doc, you want a drink?" And Doc just shakes his head no. And then enters, what was his name?
His name was Pete Grant.
Yeah.
Played by a Doug McClure. Hell of a name.
That was really drug out. That was fun. So anyway, Pete comes in, and they're kind of sizing each other up, and he wants to make sure it is the Al Denton. Mm-hmm. So we see Al looking at his bottle, the little potion bottle.
Has it you're quick.
Yeah.
Says Pete.
Ooh. And no, he goes, yeah. No, that was Denton that said that, because I liked, wasn't it? Because I liked Pete's line. Is "I aim to find out."
Yes,
right?
Pete comes in and says, "I hear you're quick." Denton replies with, "You'll have time to find out."
I aim to.
And Pete's response is, "I aim to," with a flicker of a grin.
It was very punny.
Now comes the most intense moment of this episode. Everything coming together. Al's life. Pete's childhood, as he's probably 23 at the time.
Maybe a little younger, even.
Man, why you gotta step all over my intense voice?
I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop now. Go on.
Everything coming together at one time. 2 quick draw sharpshooters meeting in one saloon, surrounded by 30 very soon to be shot spectators. Al turns to the bar, takes his drink of the potion gifted to him by Fate himself, turns to face his opponent, and what does he see but oh damn, Pete's taking a drink of the same thing. Somebody's been double-crossed.
In theaters near you.
Never. This is 1,000 years old.
Anywho.
So we see Pete take a drink from an identical bottle, clearly gifted to him by Death. Fate. Not Death. Death was last episode. It's fine.
Sure. Well, you know.
And they lock eyes. Understanding. Growing from a fetus into a full-grown, awkward adult.
I'd like to point out that the understanding was mostly on Denton's part. He's surprised, but he's older, and that's clear.
Yeah, Pete was mostly confused and concerned.
The look of childish confusion on Pete's face.
Followed by childish terror on Pete's face was gloriously done. I am not familiar with Doug McClure, but I can tell you from the 30 seconds worth of acting I saw him portray, I would buy a movie just because his face was on the title.
Well, yeah.
Or on the cover,
He wasn't bad.
The poster.
Either. So anywho, they have a beat.
I was referring to his acting, not his aesthetic appeal, but thank you, wife.
I love you, husband.
I know.
All right. So they give it a beat, where they're locking eyes, and then they both draw, and they both fire.
Same time draw, same time fire. It's almost like they didn't have control of it.
And they weren't counting. That's clear.
They definitely weren't counting because it was almost a minute.
It was such a painful pause that I'm sitting there when we're watching it. Like, it's definitely been past 10 seconds, y'all.
Like, y'all, neither of you are going to hit the broadside of a barn. Like, this new guy's about to shoot the bartender. Dan's about to shoot Miss Smith, and she's in her house half a block away.
Yeah, that was a painful moment for me.
Like, this bar is about to get annihilated.
Yep.
Riddled.
So they both shoot at the same time. They fire, They aim and fire. They shoot the hand.
From the hip. Both of them fired from the hip.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Both out the holster, fired, arm at a 90-degree angle from the hip. Neither of them actually drew and aimed.
Oh, okay. Well,
they both fired from the hip like idiots.
Apparently I have
that had fate on their side.
Selective detail when I pay attention to stuff.
I just like criticizing people's form.
All right, that's fair. It doesn't matter how they did it because
details are important to me. That's right. I sat on that for half an hour.
That happened. It happened. All right. So they shoot each other's shooting hand.
They do. Each other.
Mm-hmm. And Doc comes out and
beautiful
says, "It's a push. Nobody wins."
No winners.
I was disappointed he didn't call it a draw. But,
why?
I don't know, because it seemed fitting. It's a duel with guns, drawing.
Man, you just like puns.
I do. I can't help myself sometimes.
You're such a dad.
So we don't see Pete right away. His next thing we see is Doc wrapping up Al's shooting hand
and informing him, "You ain't never gonna fire a gun with this hand again.
Fingers are gonna be a little stiff."
But the way you stood there will be something to tell your grandkids.
And by the way it looks, you're gonna live to have some.
Oh,
I know.
Oh my God.
At which point, Denton then walks over to Pete, who's wrapping his own hand without helping the doc.
The doctor doesn't care about Pete.
Nobody cares about the away team.
He's an outsider. Nobody cares. He can wrap his own.
I really like that bit of conversation that they have. Is he's referring to his hand and goes, "Just like me, you'll never again be able to fire a gun in anger." And goes on to say, "You're blessed, son.
You're blessed, son."
At which point Pete walks away.
Angry. Just angry.
Fuming. And
a little bit of disappointment.
Denton, Miss Smith, again appears by Denton's side because she can't stay away.
She's just off to the side of the set, and the director's kicking her on the scene whenever he wants her there.
And the last thing that Denton says in regards to the event that just occurred is he's lucky. He learned early. And then Fate. We see Fate again?
No, we see, we do in a moment, but we see Pete come stumbling out of the bar up to a couple of his friends.
Right.
One of which looks at the hand and says, "Did you get him, Pete?" And he's, "Not anymore. He got me." And he glances up, and who should be standing there but Fate, smiling, as he finishes loading up his cart.
He's just glaring at him.
Yeah.
Hating life.
Pulls his cowboy hat down so he looks a little bit cooler, and then walks away with his friends.
It just came off as very, pouty child.
It was such a pouty child moment. He was covering his eyes so nobody could see him crying. It was beautiful. And that's what I'm saying. I would buy a film that had Doug McClure on the cover just because I love how he portrayed Pete Grant.
That's fair.
At that point, Denton comes out with Miss Smith onto the porch of the saloon, I assume to gloat or something, maybe just get some fresh air with his newly bullet-riddled hand. And we see Fate, who gives a very polite smile and tip of the hat as he pulls away in his carriage.
Super classic.
Just clean moment.
And the ending narration here, and I actually wrote down because I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And, well, I wrote an abridged version of what the actual quote was, but
you know how I feel about abridged things.
Yeah, but the gist of it was, Fate helped one man climb out of a pit and prevented another from falling into one.
Because sometimes that's how fate does work here in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and that was encapsulated the moral of this episode.
See, and that's just it, is I didn't feel like there was a moral in this episode.
I mean...
what's the moral?
If a stranger offers...
That's not a moral.
No.
That's not a moral at all. That's what you tell your kid when they come home from school with a bloody nose. And like, the mean kid hit me. You're like, well, next time hit him back. And if that doesn't work when he comes home, you're like, he hit me again. You're like, well, and fate must have stepped in the way, not let you hit him so you couldn't get suspended. Clearly, fate was on your side. Stop getting hit.
One final note on production note, I assume.
Doubtful.
Is what I've been calling it. is that starting from the beginning, Dan was in black.
Dan?
Fate
Puddling.
was in black.
I don't actually remember Fate's full name.
Henry J. Fate.
Henry J. Fate.
Was in black. And Pete Grant.
Pete Childface Grant.
Was also in black.
All the protagonists.
Yeah.
All the protagonists in black. Is protagonist the right word? I'm pretty sure protagonist is the right word.
Isn't it antagonist?
I don't know.
Protagonist is a good guy.
Listeners, tweet at us.
I haven't been a student for a
What's
very
the
long
definition
time.
of protagonist and antagonist? At me.
I've been questioning it for a bit, but I don't want to say nothing. So, anywho, that is episode 3.
Just for the record, we're going to stop using the words protagonist and antagonist until somebody corrects us.
Yeah, so please tweet at us. So I've been Bethany.
I'm still Konr.
Yeah, and this is Wonder With Us. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.